Okay. Sorry, I forgot to put the mic on. Okay, I'm back. I had a big weekend of puppeteering, so I got a little rusty, I guess. I did do some work on Max here. Uh, did do some work on Max. Um, he's coming along. I'm glad I went to all that trouble to move him because I'm gonna move him right back. Okay, so what I basically did on here was I was trying to figure out what to use for his palms. And what I decided to do was lost the camera. I guess I'll have two cameras today. What I decided to do was I shaved down some of the same fur that I was doing to make a pad. It'll be the same color, but have a shorter fur. I may shave it down even more after I get it installed, but that's the solution I came up with. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install doll joints in here, which this is a 3-part thing. There's a washer part. There's I guess a pin part, which is going to go up inside the shoulder, and then this is the lock plate piece that will go on. If you put it on like this, it'll stay forever. If you put it on like this, you can actually remove it. I don't like this type. I like the type that are flat, but I don't have any of those, so this is what you get. So usually I put these things in such a way so that, come on. Oh boy, he doesn't want to come off here. Okay, so usually I put these things in. Usually I don't use them, is what I'm trying to say. Is I just usually tie it off with a shoelace with a couple of holes here and a plastic washer that you tie to. But because this is a single piece and there's no removable head, it makes it a lot harder to do that. So I'm using a doll joint. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sink this piece up through the body, through the foam, and out a hole in the shoulder here. So it'll have a little stub that comes out. And that in turn will go through a hole in the shoulder that goes into the washer, which I drilled 2 holes into and then tied the shoelace to. And I actually put glue on it already, so I'm going to do that right now. There's a hole that I cut right here, and I'm going to line up that hole, and it's tied on. And then I also put glue on between these 2 lines here. I'm going to glue that on. So now the forearm is locked in place and the shoulder's locked in place. And then we have the shoelace that basically acts as an internal system, so that when you pull on this, it's not pulling on the sewing that you do here or the doll joint or here. It's actually pulling on this shoelace, which is really strong and will keep it from breaking on you or coming loose. And the doll joint, which this is going to have the post out of that shoulder come up through, and then will lock in place once it's all put together. So anyway, that's the way the system works, which seems to work pretty well for me. I wanted to make sure that I had both arms ready and facing the right direction so that you have one of each. You want it to be able to come out through the rod will come out through the right side. You don't have 2 right arms. You have a right arm and a left arm, basically. And the other thing is that there's the hole. It's going to go on. I just line up the hole there, and that's actually on the pattern, the hole where the hole goes, so that again the doll joint will come up through that hole, through the washer, and then locked in place once it's installed. Now, from there, I'm going to basically pin this all in place, and that'll become his arm. And then I'll cut out these pads, which I'll do that right now. I'll show you how that works. Okay. So I'm gonna cut out these hands. And hopefully these trimmed hands won't be as unruly as the untrimmed ones. You never know. Okay, so there's that. And this will go on just like that. And I will sew all that by hand around here. And then I'm going to end up stuffing this part as well. But for now, I'm just going to sew it up till I get to about here and leave that open, stuff it, and then I want to have it open for when I put it onto the body, and then I'll ladder stitch just this last little bit here. So actually probably going to have to ladder stitch most of it, but there's that. Let me cut out the other one. See, on Eddie, I just used fleece for this part, but I didn't want to have to deal with trying to match, because Eddie's just basically white right out of the box. It's super easy to match his colors, but with this, because it is a pre-dyed fur, I knew I'd never even get close beyond my regular color blindness. Okay, nice. What are you building? I'm building Max the dog here. So that's what I've been working on. I'm working on the hands for him, and trying to document every part of this process for people. So that'll be be a little bit more forgiving if this this fabric had any stretch to it, but it does not. Slit here, right here at the little, it will allow me to poke that little rod through. And if this was a removable rod, then that would be that could just be a hole that it feeds through. Basically, I mean, even though this is not finished, you can kind of see how it's gonna. And I'm gonna trim this up too, so it won't look like Chewbacca's arm here. But I think I'll just probably trim it real, leave some of it like up at the shoulder really shaggy, so it gives us keeps some texture. But I think it does need to be trimmed at the forearm and specifically the fingers to make it work a little bit better. Now my favorite part, where I deal with this fabric, this fur. Will this have a new mechanism? No, probably not. I mean, it does sort of have a mechanism in here. It just happened, and mechanisms don't have to be completely. I mean, this is kind of an accidental mechanism. So what happened was the way I installed these ears. There's the rod that holds it together is right here, and I can put my ring finger on there and kind of pull down on it to make his ears go. But that's all it is. It's not really a mechanism. This is such a weird, like, puppet that's super simple. But the problem with Eddie was he had a mechanism in there, but I couldn't actually use it when I was talking. So again, he's, hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? And then, it's not much, but it is something. And actually, because the head is hollow, I can actually, without putting there, I can put my middle finger there, and I can kind of push down on his eyebrows. Let's see if I can do that. There we go. And he can kind of do a little bit. You don't really need a whole lot. Thank you. Yeah, it's basically the same pattern. Oh, I don't have Eddie here with me, but it's the same pattern as Eddie, but I'm just making modifications to make a puppet for somebody else. So I was on a shoot yesterday, which was great. Actually, puppeteering. There's a bunch of puppets that I built for a project. Hopefully, I'll be able to share that at some point. But we were working on this thing, and as part of it, we had to dump a bunch of feathers on us, and so I've been picking feathers out of everything all day. I actually broke my glasses today, which is great. The other pair of glasses, I stepped on them, and as I picked up the pieces, there was part of a feather that had been wedged in the hinges. Yeah, that was the nose I made the other day. It's exactly. Everybody asks me. That's kind of the purpose of these videos. Is whenever people see Eddie, they are always like, "Well, how did you do this or how did you do that?" And so I thought, well, I do a lot of weird stuff on these builds, and so many of these builds are less. The right answer is just the answer. Figuring it out as you go. And I may not have the same technique that somebody else does, but I think the more techniques you're exposed to, the better off you are as far as being able to solve other problems that you run across when building. I'm so blind I have to use these other. Okay, so I'm just going to start. Maybe I'll zoom in on this so you can see. Oops. Oh, okay. And again, because of this fur, leaving the edge. I mean, any bad, any bad stitch I might have, you're never going to see it because this fur is really forgiving in that way. It's not so forgiving as far as like any stretch, because there's absolutely no stretch to it. But let's see what we see here. Yeah, I was just reading your message there, TC, and I I gotta say that that's one of the reasons I feel a little like I want to start teaching more online as far as this stuff goes, and I think so much of it is we're all using the same materials and a lot of the same techniques, but we all kind of find our own way through it. And I feel like there's this tendency of online um, teachers to say there's one way to do everything. There's a right way, there's a wrong way. Whereas I think it's a lot of subtle differences that every builder has their own way of tackling these problems. And I was very lucky early on to be exposed to a lot of different builders and the way they worked. This is going to be a horrible thing to try and put. I'm just telling you right now, this is going to be a really tough puppet to to sew with this fur, the way it is going right now. But I was very lucky to have a lot of different early mentors, when I was first kind of building, that all had a little bit different way of working. And, I used throughout this project, I've used techniques that I picked up from several different builders, including like the way that I do seams or the way that I do a one-off pattern that maybe like ears or something. I use like a paper towel, which I think is just like hysterical, but it's super easy and cheap to do it. I didn't actually have to do a specific head sculpt for this one, so I couldn't show you that process, but hopefully I've shown you enough that you find it interesting. I won't take that comment out of context there, TC. I saw your the other one, the who wrote that one? Rob. I saw your one about the your autistic daughter building body character costumes. I haven't done a whole lot of that. I did the one Nine Numb costume cosplay thing that has a movable jaw, but yeah, that's a whole like. There's a lot of techniques that overlap with what I do. The patterning's kind of the same. Uh, the materials are kind of the same, and it's. I think what's interesting is the you know I I feel as though the things that I learned outside of puppetry inform the way that I build, and I think that probably building a lot of walkarounds would influence the way that you would build a puppet, or vice versa. It's all very interesting. I have a feeling that I'm going to sew one of these up on camera, and then I'm going to take a break. And the next time you see me, I'll have both arms done. Because filming this is the most boring thing I think there is. Yeah, and I just read your thing about the world needing more puppets and furry friends, and I think that's totally true. I mean, you've done a lot at GTC. You build a lot of puppets that you're able to sell, which wish I could sell more. I want to say that on Eddie, I glued down these palms, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Now, the technique I'd use if I was making these movable would be probably a little bit different, but maybe I'll do one of those next time. See, a lot of my background in building is for like live appearances. Like I did a lot of Comic Cons early on with the puppets, and so I build them a little differently in some ways. Like I don't like for walkarounds. I don't like to have removable rods because they always come out at the wrong time, or I always end up stabbing somebody with the pins that are in there to keep them in place. So this is more of like a walk around, or a personal appearance type puppet with the rods that don't come out, and the arms and everything being overbuilt. But I usually spend a lot of time on the. This fur is just horrible. I usually spend a lot of time on uh, the inner structure on these types of puppets because, again, it's if you want to. You end up using the hands and the mouth so much that if they're not over engineered, then they end up breaking at the absolute worst time. I guess that goes for TV or any type of puppetry, but I really see it in the live stuff because I think that's probably the most I've done. Well, that's one finger. Oh boy. For so long, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of dumb actually. I was a little, you know, I was both excited to share puppets with people and also a little embarrassed by the fact that I did it. So I think I've gotten a lot better these days at sharing it. But for the longest time, I would, have a puppet in a bag and I'd never bring it out because I was too afraid what people would say. And it's, I think in the last probably 5 or 6 years, I've been a little bit better about, oh, I'm at some street fair or something and bring out a puppet and just goof around with people. I think that's probably how I share puppets most of the time, other than trying to teach people how to build. Oh my gosh. So I was using the ladder stitch before, but I kind of think I don't need to with this part. At least this inside of this finger. Could be wrong. What a mess. From now on, all my puppets are going to be made from F3 fleece because this fur is killing me. We'll go back. Hopefully you're not just seeing the back of my head. And again, every about 9 stitches, I tie it off so that if it does unravel, then I only have 9 stitches to replace. Oh, no worries, Rob. I just saw you got back. I was just talking about that. That the way that building costumes is probably informs the way that you would build puppets, just because you found out little tricks and things that work with that medium. I know I watch a lot of cosplay videos because they have a lot of techniques and materials that puppeteers aren't using a lot, and I think it's very helpful to cross-pollinate between the two things. I keep thinking maybe I shouldn't say this one out loud because somebody's going to steal my idea, but I guess that'll also prove how many people are watching these videos. I'm fascinated by Chewbacca's mechanism in his mouth, and I think where the lower jaw causes the upper lip to curl, and I've been thinking, I wonder if there's a way to modify that mechanism in a puppet so that as I work the lower jaw and get to a certain way that I can actually make the upper jaw go up as well. I think I might fool around with that a little bit. Somewhere in all this, there's a seam. Let's see. Like I said, I don't think the sewing on this is going to be particularly great or particularly have to, because this fur is so long. At least the dog only has 3 fingers, so I don't have to actually do this a 4th time. Going back to the regular stitch in this inside. Yeah, there are some really brilliant furry builders. The thing I've been noticing is, though, I like having patterns. I like being able to adapt an old pattern to a new project or rebuild an old puppet. And I've noticed a lot of the furry builders, they're all one-offs. So I kind of wish they would learn a few of the disciplines that us puppet people do, and vice versa. I think that there's some brilliant things they come up with one-offs that puppet builders that are very into, like just the Henson way of doing it, don't see, and vice versa. I don't know. Okay. I may have to redo this whole thing, but we'll see. Hopefully not. See, I should have done the one offline so that it looked like I knew what I was doing on the second one. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that in puppetry as well, where they keep where builders keep their their processes secret. I don't know. I think that maybe there's some, like, I just feel like we all elevate each other by learning each other's secrets to a lot of, to a big extent. I mean, it took me 10 years to get to the point where I was building anything that was halfway decent. And I feel like any kid who starts watching Adam Krutinger's videos is where I'm at in a couple of months, in the first 10 years. And I just think that there's something to be said for sharing these techniques across the board. I'm just wrestling this into place. Try not to stick myself with all these pins. My hope is that I can get this palm all sealed up by the time I get to the end of this thread. I don't know if it's going to happen. Okay, well. I'm tempted to shave parts of this hand just so it's easier to sew, but I feel like in doing that, it's going to make one hand look a little different than the other. Okay. Tie this off before I run out of thread. Okay, well. I know there's a pin in here. I keep grabbing it. Okay, so there it is. Let's see. Last done was a model costume of a man eating flower, and my youngest daughter made a wolf-style mask and tail, which I believe we called it. Oh, that's cool. I like that. Agreed. It's a great way to get. Well, I'm going to take a break from this for a second, but I'll be right back. I'm going to go grab C3PO. So here's a C3PO that I built at one point. It was kind of based on this this toy. Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. So but this is what I mean about kind of the cross pollination between cosplay and puppets, because I got lights in there. I've got kind of a mech, and there's no covering on it at all, but it uses very puppet techniques. I'm not really set up to puppeteer them, but I don't think that if I hadn't been studying the cosplay stuff, that I ever would have been able to build something like this. And again, it does use the puppetry aspects, but it also uses a lot of other things that have nothing to do with puppetry. So, I mean, I could be just building the same way that I always do without sharing or looking at other people's way of building, and I never would have built this. So I think it's really important to kind of cross-pollinate a lot of this stuff. Like my logo. Yeah, based on my dog. Yeah, here's where the basis of my logo comes from. It's kind of see the resemblance there. Hey, how you doing, Tilly? She gets camera shy. Okay, back to this fiasco of fur here. I mean, the only thing fur has going for it is you don't have to do the best stitches on it because it'll all be hidden. Yeah, there's Tilly. Yeah, Tilly's more famous than I am. I'll walk through my apartment complex and people with Tilly, and people yell out her name, and they have no idea who I am. I did a bang up job here. What's this? I'm just trying to find an area to start on this thing. Oh, this fur. Okay. Boy, between this rod and this fur, this is great. But you know, hands are never the easiest thing to sew, so I can't blame the fur too much. At least I got around the hand now. Yeah, Tilly's an Italian Greyhound. Italian Greyhounds and Whippets are my favorite dog breed. Yeah, they're great. Tilly's actually 13, so she's been she's been a good companion to me the last 13 years. Yeah. Hey, Josiah, how's it going? I don't think we've ever actually talked in person, but yeah, hands are again they're a double-edged sword. You know, they're a lot of work, but it's better to put the time in them and have them be nice than kind of do it, don't do a good job on it and then have something that falls apart. I absolutely hate hands that don't have an armature in it. You know, it doesn't have to be a great armature, but there's something about having that hand that just sits there like this all the time that just drives me crazy on a puppet. I would brush this out, but after seeing what happens to the texture of it, I'm hesitant to do that. Tell you what I'm going to do though. I'm going to try and do this technique that I saw online. Okay. Yeah, they are. So they said that when I got um, when I first got exposed to Italian Greyhounds, read a book that said that they were known as the Velcro dog because they want to be around you all the time. Tilly has had moments of that, but she's also been, just a really good little dog. Okay, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to try it. Try and tape down the bulk of this this fur so I can actually sew it halfway decent. I'll probably never be able to get off this tape, but we'll see. Okay, let's see if I can. This makes it any easier on me. I guess it sort of works. See, I usually spend quite a bit of time making these patterns and then never use them again. So it's always nice when you're able to reuse a pattern or parts of a pattern. Like a good chunk of my puppets are. Uh-oh. Well, that was lucky. Thread broke just as I was tying the knot. Get that last one. Okay, let me get rid of this green tape. I don't know if it helps or not. Okay, here we are with this arm. You can start to see how, now that the hand is in place, you can really see how trimming this fur will help it a little bit. You know, get a little bit more definition. And I'll trim this as well. I think probably I'll leave that upper part longer. I just basically want to make sure there's a lot of slop in the elbow and the wrist so they get a lot of movement out of it. So I don't really use the baseball stitch very much. I always forget to. I pretty much use the whip stitch most of the time, but I do it from the back. And if you look at the way there's one of these videos I did in this little series here. I think it was probably on the second day, where I showed how I pin it to the foam backwards, and then I can run the whip stitch around it, and then I know that the tension on the thread is right when I turn it right side out. And I do most of it that way, and then like the lower jaw and maybe a couple of the places where I finish, I'll just do the ladder stitch on that, and then that seems to be the easiest. I think the baseball stitch is great and everything, but I think that I'm just too much in a hurry most of the time to figure that out. Too busy making hands to spend my time doing the baseball stitch. Okay, this should be a little easier now. See, it was just because it was glued right there and had this long fur that it was tough to navigate. But now that I can kind of spread it apart a little bit with my fingers, I think it'll be a little easier to sew this part. Yeah, the only reason I wasn't using the ladder stitch all the way around the fingers and stuff in this is, number one, because of the fur, not really making it necessary, but also because it's just too hard to get this needle in there to to make sure that that was going to work. I used a curve needle for the first time yesterday. It's a bit, well, it's not the first time, but it's the first time I used it without stabbing myself repeatedly. It's a learning curve like anything, I guess. So I think the reason they call this the ladder stitch, and I've never got this, I don't know this for sure, but I think it's because when you do it right, and I'm not doing it particularly right, you basically have a gap between the two, and it makes like what looks like a ladder here. And then when you get to a certain point, you can pull on it and it'll close that up. Let me try that again. Anyway, I like the ladder stitch, but they say it's not as strong. Who knows? Okay, so I've gotten to the elbow at least. Well, I gotta go, as in that's my neighbor. But I will be back. All right, have a good day. We'll see you in a bit. If you only had one more hand, you could keep the fur out of the way. It's totally true. All right, I'll be back.